And then just to remember, I know we have come through an election season that's been very fulsome and dividing to some. We are a wonderfully cross-partisan group with many diverse opinions, and we want to welcome all of those opinions amongst us today and appreciate that you've joined Common Sense American with that kind of spirit, and we'll bring that kind of spirit into the meeting. Um, Today we will hear from Keith for probably about 20 minutes or so on a couple of fronts on an update on Capitol Hill, some exciting new news that we've just learned that we'll bring into this meeting, and then helping us sort of explore the next process of choosing questions. Do we take on a more challenging issue? We'll then take you into breakout rooms. You'll be in about 6 or 7 people in a breakout room. Yeah, some of you will have a facilitator. Some of you will ask to self-facilitate. I'll give a little more instructions as we get to that. But thanks to our robust response and thanks to our many wonderful facilitators, we still needed more facilitators. So some of you will not have a facilitator in your room. And then we're going to do a little report out from those conversations. And then toward the end, at about 9 o'clock, we're going to offer an optional sort of Q&A time, which has also been very, very fun for people to stick around and really have a conversation with Keith with some of the questions that may not have gotten answered during the session. Okay, with that, then I am going to turn it over to our good executive director, Keith Allred.
Good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the largest national meeting of Common Sense Americans in history. This is where you are breaking a record tonight, and it is just so exciting for me to just see the panels fill up here with people from across the country joining us. It is, our growth has been just stunning. Our impact in Congress has been stunning, and just the participation and the engagement. So our capacity to really do good is really going up. And as Cheryl noted, we're all aware of the challenges in our politics right now and just how raw and bitter some of that has become. And so just as the need is greatest, our capacity is growing rapidly. So I am just so delighted to see all of you. Thank you all for joining. So I'm going to do just a little bit of some updates on kind of where things stand on this year's issue, Workforce Pell, and do that pretty quickly, and then kind of set up the discussion tonight. This is really meant to be a discussion where we get some input from you on some big questions and some big developments, and so we want to reserve as much time for kind of breaking out into groups where you can discuss, and then that we can get a little bit of feedback. So in terms of the kind of updates on Workforce Pell, the Congress just started this week back in the lame duck session of this Congress, not the newly elected one, but this Congress finishing its business. Their current plan is to finish business around December 20th. By that time, they've got to refund the government, and so they got to stick around there, and a lot will happen. And I would say our prospects are at about 30 or 40%. Now, at every issue in the 3-for-3 track record we've racked up in Congress, we always started at about 20 to 40% when we took on the issue. So what are the chances that, something sensible in this topic area that we work on that, we think is a good idea will pass? And you'd start out at saying, about 20 or 30%. And then as you get near the end of the year, each of the last 3 times it's gone up 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. We got it. We actually succeeded. I will confess to you that sitting here in mid-November, the needle is stuck at about 30 or 40%. And on those 3 victories in the past, the needle had been starting to go up by this point. So it will be challenging ahead, but certainly there is a good chance. And I see question, how's the probability? It's, it's more or less me going like this. I mean, there's nothing super sophisticated about that, but just my sense from it. The one of the really important pieces to emphasize here is that we are now at over 290 congressional offices that we briefed. I think we're at 296, 297. They're happening so frequently, guys. Let me know kind of where we are, but around 296, 297, I think is where we are. We're briefing congressional offices every day still. We will certainly go over the 300 threshold. In the past, we have done typically 50 congressional offices in a year, and that's a 6-fold increase in our congressional engagement year over year. It's just absolutely stunning to me. And that is, for the most part, the lion's share of the reason of that is that we have this phenomenal state ambassador program now that we have in about 40 of our states now. We have state ambassadors who help schedule and then help lead those briefings of congressional offices. And it's not just the quantity, but the power of those briefings have really gone up. So we're bringing as good a game as we ever have. It's just that the partisan divides in the Congress get tougher and tougher. And it's not even really a partisan divide. There's really about 80-85% consensus in the Congress, but there's a few key chairmen here and there, and a few pieces that they're still struggling with. So they're still working on it. We're still highly engaged. We met, in fact, with Majority Leader Schumer's office just this week to talk about it, and they had some suggestions of things they ask us to do, and so we're back and forth. So it's very much active, but we'll see. And we will be continuing to do congressional offices and working on it. You'll be getting more updates from us. So that's this year's topic. Now I'm going to change orientation to have us start thinking about the future and what we're going to do there. So right now we have a 3-for-3 track record. It may be within about a month or so we have either a 3 out of 4 track record or a 4 out of 4 track record. We're not quite sure. But now we're talking about our 5th issue that we're going to take on in 2025. And the primary question that we posed for this meeting tonight was whether we should take on a tougher issue. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and what we mean by a tougher issue, and we want to have some conversation. But I am delighted to report that we have 3 pieces of CommonSense American breaking news that have significantly affect that question. And these are breaking over the last week, some of the developments in just the last 2 or 3 days. And I'm just going to preview this by saying these are 3 of the biggest pieces of CommonSense American news in our 6-year history. I am a little bit pinching myself still that those are. So I want to share that news with you, and we're gonna adjust our conversation tonight because of this major news, because it really impacts our thinking about tougher issues, and so we want that to inform that conversation, and we want to get a little input from you on the breaking news itself. So how's that for the buildup? I need a drum roll. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, and it's in fact 3 pieces of breaking news that we're going to share. So let me just get set up here where I can share that. All right, is that working for everybody? Okay. So, breaking news item 1. The Senate's Common Sense Coalition has agreed to explore with us picking the same issue to work on in 2025. That is that the Senate bipartisan group and we look at if we could find agreement on the same issue to work on. Now, in our 3-for-3 track record, in each case, we have partnered closely with a Senate bipartisan group. It's loosely overall called the CommonSense Coalition. The exact composition of the group changes by issue, but on surprise medical billing, the bipartisan infrastructure, and the Electoral Count Reform Act, we work closely with these groups. So this is a long-standing relationship, and we have been discussing with them the possibility of what if we picked the same issue, like in advance, we kind of did this a little bit more. It's kind of turned out that way 3 times, but what if we did that in a little more planful way and a particular process for that, which I'm going to share in a minute. I've got pictures of Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, and Senator Michael Bennet, Democrat from Colorado, who are going to co-chair a process by which the Senate considers our input, the Senate bipartisan group considers our input into what issue they pick, and we consider their input. And they are co-chairing that process for us. And that we got that agreement just a little over a week ago from them. Second piece of breaking news is that the House's bipartisan working group is interested in also exploring picking the same issue. So that is, we have the lead bipartisan working group in the Senate, the lead bipartisan working group in the House, and the lead bipartisan grassroots organization working in Congress, CommonSense American, all explore, hey, might we be able to pick the same issue to all work on so that we not only have the bipartisan power to try to do some sane problem solving in the midst of these raw political differences, but that we have the bi-chamber, both the House and the Senate working with us on it. And then on the strength of those 2 developments, that has pretty splashy, to use a technical term for it, that we're pulling off. That's quite a testament to the kind of stature we have developed in the Congress. On the strength of that, we have invited, and he has accepted, to add an additional co-chair to the National Institute for Civil Discourse Advisory Committee, which is, CommonSense American has a program of that. And so former Republican Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott has agreed to be the NICD co-chair, joining former Democratic Senate Majority Leader, sorry, I left his name off here, Tom Daschle, and former Governor Christy Todd Whitman as NICD co-chair. So that gives us a strong Republican, a strong Democrat, and then of course Christy Todd Whitman has left the Republican Party and has founded the Forward Party, and so kind of a centrist. So we really have a prominent set of co-chairs who really represent the range in the country, and they are helping us convene this group and inviting the senators and the members of the House to join in this process with us. So these are all just really exciting pieces of news. So I want to kind of flesh out what that means a little bit. I can imagine that you might say, well, okay, sounds good, but what exactly are we talking about? So let me start with kind of the fundamental guiding principles for the kind of cooperation and taking into account each other's views that undergirds the agreement that we're forming with these groups. So the most important first point to make, I think, is that no one of the 3 groups, not us, not CommonSense American, not the CommonSense Coalition in the Senate, not the bipartisan working group in the House, is giving up their independent decision-making authority on what issue we choose to work on, right? We all retain for ourselves at the end of the day that, we will ultimately pick our own issue. We're interested in considering yours, but we haven't given up. We've just said, well, whatever you choose as an issue is the issue that we'll choose. That is not what we've done. So Each is simply agreeing to consider the other group's views when we are choosing an issue, to kind of take that into account, let that inform our thinking as we make our own choice. But in doing that, we all recognize the ability to advance sound bipartisan problem solving just goes up enormously for each of the three groups, including us, if we're all working on the same issue and rowing together. And so that then, gets us to the original topic for the night. The prospect for taking on a bigger, tougher issue and doing it successfully, where we can actually move the ball and Congress might actually pass sane legislation on that tougher issue, goes up several fold if we are doing it in conjunction with the leading Senate bipartisan working group and the leading House bipartisan working group. So those are some of the guiding principles. And then here's a little bit about how the process will work. And there, some details still being worked out. Let me just say the Senate group has agreed to work with us in this way. And so they've made that commitment. The bipartisan working group in the House has expressed keen interest in it. We've had a couple of meetings with them and some email exchanges back and forth. And they are currently kind of going through the process to decide informally if they will commit to this process. Again, it's committing to a process, not committing to, yeah, we will pick, we'll pick whatever issue you pick. Nobody is saying that. So here's the steps that we'll go through. So the first step is how it's worked in the past is we will create our top 10 bipartisan issue list by going to the senators and representatives and asking them what they see as the most promising bipartisan issues for 2025. So this is exactly what we've done in the past. We create the top 10 list for members to consider. And the way we generate that is we ask them, and by promising, we say, what do you see as the most meaningful issues that are ripe for bipartisan action this year? That is, they would matter to the American people. It's a good combination of mattering to the American people. And there's enough bipartisan interest that you could imagine you could actually get it done. It's not an absolutely impossible task. So we try to find that best combination of meaningful and achievable, and or at least the 10 issues that have the best combination of that from these interviews with senators and representatives. And that's exactly what we've done in the past. And as in the past, we'll rank order that list from 1 through 10 from most to least promising in their view. Now that just sets us up then to figure out what our own view is. And that's the second bullet here is then all of us in CommonSense American will rate those 10 issues. And, we'll ask, as we've done in the past, say, take into account, consider what the members of Congress are telling us can get done and can't get done and what's meaningful or not. Let that inform your decision, but not dictate it. Just give you good information to help you make your own decision on that. Then third, we will share the rank order from all of you with the House and Senate groups. And the Senate has committed, the House is the Senate bipartisan working group, the Common Sense Coalition has committed, and the House is considering that they'll say, yeah, we'll take your views into account as we're figuring out what issue we think we should work on as a group, recognizing that if we work with you on the same issue that you want to work on, and you can demonstrate where there's bipartisan grassroots consensus, it would really boost our work. So we got to think about doing issues that you're interested in. And then, we don't know exactly how that might come out. If, we're close and our number one issue is the Senate and the House's group number two issue and vice versa, or if we just all kind of come out and agree with the same one, or we're a little further off. So, we'll kind of see where that comes out, and then everybody, if we don't kind of automatically and pretty readily just land on the same issue to work on. Then we'll say, okay, do we need a few more steps in the process here? And for us, that might include, we come back to you for a second round of your input and say, okay, we gave them your input, and with that input, here's where they are. And, you know, it might be they're willing to work on any of these three issues and want you to pick which of those three, or, you know, there might be some second round. But again, at the end of the day, we take their perspectives and views as input into our own decision making, and we can choose to work on an issue with one or both groups, or say, yeah, we're sorry, we don't quite agree on this. We're going to go ahead and work on a different issue than you are, than it looks like you guys are going to work on. So that's the process by which that'll happen. I can imagine that you have lots of questions about the details of how that will work, and some of those details are being worked out. The timing is probably roughly in January and February. We would be interviewing the senators and representatives to get their views. Hopefully by late February, maybe early March, we would have the top 10 issues for all of you to rate. So the second step in the issue, and second step in the process. And then so by mid to late March, early April, then we can take our results back to the House and Senate groups, the third step. And so, you know, somewhere in late March, April sometime, hopefully coming to consensus on which issue we work on. And then whatever issue we pick, we go to work developing the brief that you review, and then we get the brief up and get the results in. There will be a second round of discussion if we end up on the same issue about exactly how we're going to work together. But one of the things that we've offered up is we'll do our brief and share that with you, of the strongest arguments for and against each of the proposals under consideration, as well as, you know, our members' views on that. And you'll maybe recall on both the Electoral Count Reform Act and on the House Bipartisan Workforce Pell Act, those bills, in fact, were shaped by our input. Before those bills got introduced, we shared our early results with those groups. And so the shape of the bill changed because of our input. So that's one of the ways in which working with these groups really vastly increases our ability to inform what the Congress does. Is it may actually not only help the legislation pass, but it may help shape the legislation, where they say, oh, well, there's 78% bipartisan agreement on this approach to it, but, you know, not much bipartisan agreement on that. Maybe we ought to go this way. So it increases our chance to shape the legislation as well as help it pass. So that's the process that we'll go through. So I want to come back now to the question of tougher issue, that we look through that question through the lens of knowing that we've got this prospect of working with these groups that could really build our capacity to take on a tougher issue. So I think it's useful, as Cheryl indicated, Carrie Kirk had this kind of nice alliteration for the different ways that the issue might be tougher. Might be tougher in that it's such a big deal because it's consequential. It will have such a big impact. And so people are really invested in it, and it makes it a little tougher to do a significant policy because it's so big in terms of its consequences. It might be a tougher issue because it's complex. It's just got the particulars, the substance of it is really complex. Or it might be tougher because it's controversial. Controversial makes the three, you know, the alliteration work. I like a little bit more maybe the newsy part of it, that it's some issues are going to be kind of front and center because the White House or major groups in the Congress are working on it. So it's in the news every day. And so it's getting a lot of attention. So it's tougher in the sense it's a crowded space. But and so I might you might think about controversial and polarized, but there's another aspect of that that's sort of newsy. So controversial doesn't fully capture that part of it. So we want to just lay out kind of a couple of the pro and con arguments of picking a tougher issue. On the pro side, it gives us a chance to have a larger impact on the nation's policies. These are, the big issues. And so we can have a big impact if we successfully weigh in on those and bring our common sense to the issues that need it most. It's okay, yeah, it's a tougher hill to climb, but that's where they need us most. And so maybe we ought to be, directing our capacity or, and our demonstrated capacity with a 3-for-3 track record. Maybe we ought to be dedicating that to where it's needed most. And, maybe more members complete the brief if we're taking on a tougher kind of, maybe that makes it more interesting in some way and more engaging. And just to give you a little data on that. So for the 4 issues we've taken on so far, here's the percentage of the membership who actually completed the brief. And you'll see there's a lot of variance. So with the high watermark being in 2021 on physical infrastructure, where we had nearly 20% of our members weigh in. And this year is actually the low watermark, where we're at about 4.3%. We're actually a little higher than that now. We're probably a little bit over 5% now, I think, because more have come in since we run those numbers. But that's a 4-fold difference between physical infrastructure and career-connected learning. And so, we don't know exactly what accounts for the differences in response rates. But it seems like it might be something about the issue itself. And the physical infrastructure, in terms of our 3 Cs, was certainly consequential. We're all affected by the nation's infrastructure. It was certainly complex. It was probably our most complex brief ever. And it was not so much controversial as newsy. It was just in the news every day. I think that'd be my guess as to why that had the highest response rate, is because it's in the national news every day. And you're like, hey, I have a chance to weigh in on this. Whereas career-connected learning is not in the news every day. And so I think that's my best guess as to why that might be. So those are some of the issues, some of the reasons in favor of taking on a tougher issue. But, at CommonSense American, we always look at both sides of the question. And, what are some of the reasons not to take on a tougher issue? One is our track record might slip. If we're taking on things that are harder to get done, then, the chances that we prevail go down. And that may impact our kind of ability to make a difference in the future, because, we don't seem as influential. It might impact our ability to attract new members to join us, which the larger our membership, the more the ability we have to make a real difference. And maybe taking on a tougher issue doesn't raise the number of the number of members who respond. Maybe it goes down. Maybe they say, geez, a complex issue, I don't want to do another infrastructure brief like we did. That thing was too hard. And this issue sounds hard. Or if they're really more controversial than newsy, it's like, oh, that issue is just too tough and people are just too angry about it. Like, that's exhausting to work on that one. No, thank you. And so maybe it doesn't increase response rates. I guess one way I would frame the decision is a high risk, high gain. Taking on a bigger, tougher issue is a higher risk in the sense of harder to prevail, but higher gain if we do prevail, then it has a bigger impact. And that risk reward ratio, I think part of why these bipartisan working group prospects are so interesting is that makes the risk reward ratio much better. We have a much better chance of prevailing, taking on even a tougher issue if we're working with them than if we're not. And so it kind of changes that pro and con argument. So whatever we might have thought a couple of weeks ago before these developments about the pros and cons, the pro argument got strengthened quite a bit by the prospect of being able to work with these leading Senate and House groups. So that, I think, takes us through the kind of setup we wanted to have for the discussion. And I'll just say, so we're going to have, I think Cheryl's going to say a little bit more about the discussion, but I just want to say, at the end of the day on the tougher issue, it's not like we're going to decide that tonight. We're not going to just decide in the abstract, yeah, let's take on a tougher issue. It'll be the actual choice we make. And so we're just trying to get people to think about this in advance of the new year, when you'll each have a chance individually to weigh in and kind of get ourselves to be considering all of the arguments pro and con on that. So ultimately, you'll make your own judgment on that. So we'd like to hear a little bit and get a sense of that. That will help us in some of the work we're doing now. But it's especially useful for us to get feedback from you on these recent developments, and two aspects of that. What do you like most about the prospect of working with these bipartisan groups? And what questions and concerns do you have? And we'd really like to hear from you on this late breaking news. And, we've got a good number of people here tonight, but we have more than 82,000 members. And so that will really help shape, what questions do people have? What concerns do they have? How we communicate this out, the prospects of this to the rest of the group. And so that's the part we'd like you to most focus on in your groups, is what you think about working with these groups, what you like best about it, what your questions and concerns are. And then to go into, given that, what are some of your thoughts on taking on a tougher issue? Cheryl, I think that was everything I was supposed to set up. Is that, did I cover the things I was supposed to?
Sounds great, Keith. Yes. Thank you. And if you could stop sharing screen, I'll share a little. Thank you. We have, as Keith was saying, and as you know, we are, here we go. Are you seeing that? So we're going to go into about 15 minutes of a small group conversation. When we go into these conversations, we really want to hear from you again, what your thoughts are on this working with the bipartisan working group, and taking on a tougher issue. But before we do that, we want to just set some of these agreements, and some of you have heard these before. We encourage you to listen with curiosity for understanding. We want you to really speak from your own authentic experience. Think about connecting with respect to each other. We've got a diverse group of people here. Just observe any common ground, and be purposeful and conscientious about sharing time. Oh, I guess I forgot to put that on slide, you guys. Sorry. I'll slide this over now. What we'd like you to do, again, some of you will have a facilitator in your group. We've got a wonderful group of CommonSense American facilitators and ambassadors who are here, who are assigned to different groups. Many of you will have a facilitator, and they will identify themselves at the beginning when you get in your group. Some of you will not have a facilitator because we had such a robust response. So we just invite you to go ahead and have one person in your group just take the lead and help facilitate these questions with us. We really, as Keith mentioned, we really would like you to explore this first question most fully. What do you like best, and what concerns and questions do you have about the process of working with a bipartisan working group? And we'll give you a little time reminder on that, and then take a few minutes toward the end about sort of, should CommonSense American take on more challenging issues as you think about it, as you've heard Keith describe them. So we'd like to just take a few minutes to kind of get your sense of things and your conversations. And we're going to invite you, please, to put your thoughts and questions into the chat. We're going to keep those. We're going to gather all of these, as well as a survey that we'll send out to everybody afterwards. But we'd like you to put into the chat, your thoughts, your questions, or your concerns about working with the bipartisan working group. And then we're also going to invite just a couple of our facilitators to share what came out of their groups, so we get a little bit of voice into the room. So with that, keep putting stuff into the chat, but go ahead. Why don't we have Cynthia? Why don't you come off on mute and share?
Thank you, Cheryl. What a great group, and thank you all very much for being so energized and thoughtful. We seem to have quite a bit of consensus, I'm going to call it, in the group, and that to a person we said, always there's strength in numbers. So if it's possible, why not coordinate, collaborate, whatever the right verb is, with the bipartisan groups, both in the Senate and in the House, if we can make that work. And in fact, there seemed to be an agreement also that this may enable us to take on the more challenging issue because it gives us a louder voice or the strength in numbers that we have been seeking. There was one concern about it, and it wasn't a concern, I think, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting my group. They were very thoughtful. It's not a concern about about working with these other groups, but it's a concern that bipartisanship is going to be a lost voice in this Congress at any time, but also especially now. So that's not to say we shouldn't do it, but it is a fear that that would happen. And let's see. Oh, so should we take on a bigger, more complex, more controversial, consequential issue? The consensus was yes, we should. And what we really also was really reported out in this group was that CommonSense American does such a fabulous job creating the briefs, pulling together all of the data and analyzing it. And so we feel very good and comfortable undertaking a bigger topic.
Great, great. Thank you, Cynthia. And appreciate things that are coming into chat. Please keep your thoughts coming in there. Let me ask, let's see, Jason. Jason, can you share with us out of your group, what were some of the challenges, concerns, or questions or benefits about working with a bipartisan working group, especially?
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like our group, and it sounds very similar to how Cynthia's group was as well. We had a great group, some great discussion, and we were right in the middle of building up to some good discussion, then it cut off. It's just never enough. In fact, I think Joe got cut off mid sentence, didn't get a finish. But one of the things that we really liked about the bipartisan working group, and I really hope that I too am representing our thoughts well, is how much steam that can help us build at the beginning. If we can come in to an issue already having two groups in Congress, in the Senate and the House, already like that we work together on, and they're backing us, and that they can point to our work, and we can use those use those as references as we go and meet with other people. I think that helps us get started, get out of the gate so much faster. There was a little bit of concern that was brought up about, even though just the legislators themselves still might feel pressure to push for an issue that might be outside of our interests. But then as we talked about it more, we felt really comfortable with how Keith described it, that we'd still maintain our independence as we go through this process. But that was the only concern that we really had. It was nice to be able to, it's nice to be kind of the common sense solution in the big extremes that we have, where we have sides pushing for each of their own issues. And then to be in the middle, it gives us a lot of power in a Senate and a House that's so evenly divided to come in and make to enact some real change, and to do that with our briefs to educate people on the actual facts and get outside of the rhetoric. So it's really good. And then as far as taking on challenging issues, I think that we just talked about it quickly at the end, but the positives definitely outweigh the negatives, and it feels like it's really nice to be able to take on an issue that Congress really struggles with.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jason. And then let's take one more. Kathleen, can you share with us I look and see who you are.
Yes, I can share. We had kind of a small group, but we were mighty. And what we found was that everyone in my group also really mentioned that we have this evenly divided nation, and that the loud people, perhaps the people in Congress themselves, are on sides of the issue. And we were all wanted to work for consensus. As a matter of fact, the people in our group had been active, like in the League of Women Voters, Better Angels, and StoryCorps' One Small Step. So they're already committed to doing more, finding common sense, finding solutions together. That was really, really important to us. And picking a bigger issue, I hope I'm representing them as truthfully as it can, that taking on a bigger issue may mean a bigger impact, which is really important. And we'd like to continue to have a bigger impact. There was some concern about, would the bipartisan working groups really be functioning with the new Congress? And if they are going to be functioning, that gives us just more power to work with people who are already seeking solutions to problems. So we thought that would be, the group thought it would be good to consider the same issues. They liked picking 10 issues that we could look at. We talked about the importance of following like our conversation agreements and making sure that everyone's opinion is respected and that there's a lot of common ground if we can find it. So I found that it was a group that was concerned but hopeful that our approach to finding common ground and common sense solutions is a possibility for the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kathleen. And I'm going to observe we've just gone a little bit over time. We appreciate it. I want to turn it back over to Keith for sort of a few closing thoughts. And then we're going to have an optional, anybody can hang on for another half hour. Keith is here. We can explore more of the questions, any of your concerns. But Keith, turn it back to you. There you are.
Muted here. I'll just say that our group sounded very similar to the groups we heard the report out on. And I'll just say, I love CommonSense Americans. I've so enjoyed our small group discussion and hearing the report out. I see in the chat one person saying, we're told we're really divided. I'm not convinced of it. And I think there's a real point there that the data show that at least on issues, everyday Americans aren't nearly as far apart as people think. In fact, that everyday Republicans and Democrats agree on twice as much as they think they do. And we really demonstrate that here. It's just such a powerful group. And boy, in the wake of all the tough kind of political wrangling that's been going on, it just is so faith restoring. I'll just say a little bit of a theme here that I see in the report outs of the groups and the chat, and I'll get into this more deeply after our kind of formal close and we have the informal Q&A period. But I do really agree with the points people are making that given how narrow the divides are in Congress, that really makes our work important and makes it possible for us to be effective and makes these bipartisan working groups really effective. The press really is misleading when they talk about who now has control of the House and the Senate and the White House. The founders of this country really designed the system primarily so that you could not do things on a purely partisan basis. And that becomes even more true when the groups are evenly divided. And if you look at over the last 5 or 6 years, Jack helped lead an analysis of this for us. The major legislation that's been passed, it has been almost entirely the Senate bipartisan working group that we're working with. And so the 3 issues that we've worked on, Surprise Medical Billing, Infrastructure, Electoral Count Reform Act, but add to that also the Chips and Sciences Act, Safer Communities Act, the Respect for Marriage Act, every single one of those. So policymaking wasn't driven out of the Speaker's house. The Speaker of the House's office wasn't driven out of the Senate Majority Leader's office, wasn't even driven out of the White House. It was the Senate Bipartisan Working Group, because we have a system that won't allow you to do things on a purely partisan basis, and we have a very evenly divided Congress. And those groups that are at the center of us are saying, yeah, we'll work with you. I mean, it's just stunning to me. And it, you know, hats off to the work all of you have done over the last couple of years to get us to that spot that we have that kind of standing. I just couldn't be prouder than to be shoulder to shoulder with all of you in this good work. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks for all the good work you do.
Great. Thank you, Keith. And I think with that, we'll sort of formally close, and anybody who needs to leave, leave. And the rest, you're welcome to stick around. And we'll explore some additional questions with Keith. I'm going to invite folks to go ahead and raise your hand. If you want to speak into the room, just go to the reactions, and then I'll also pull a couple of questions from the chat. But I see Michael. Can you go ahead and unmute yourself? And thank you, and be succinct with your question, please.
Yes, someone asked in a chat whether we collaborate with Braver Angels, and someone mentioned that someone is involved with Braver Angels, and I also am. And there is a number of other groups like Crossing Party Lines and so on, exploring this bipartisan or cross-partisan approach. And my question is how to make this collaboration maybe more robust, more systematic, so that we could maybe work together on defining this unity platform, so to say, the issues that matter most, or maybe even some solutions. Because we have this episodic interactions, but we don't have systematic collaboration. So any thoughts about this?
Michael, let me just ask for clarification. Were you asking about more robust collaboration with other groups like Braver Angels, or with the working groups in the Congress, or amongst CommonSense Americans? I wasn't quite sure.
Well, you already covered collaboration with working groups in the Congress, and I'm asking about other organizations, like grassroots organizations like Braver Angels.
Right.
So, yeah.
Good. You know, yeah, we have, you know, been the language that David Blankenhorn and I have used about the relationship between Braver Angels and CommonSense American is it's a relationship of high trust, because we clearly have such overlapping kind of objectives and efforts. And so, you know, it's kind of a long history of the way that we've worked together. I'll be honest that it's been a little bit challenging. We've tried on a couple of issues to work together on that issue. And it's been just a little hard, because there are some kind of differences, some important differences between CommonSense American and Braver Angels. And one of them is Braver Angels didn't really kind of start, it started more about kind of dialogue and improving relationships across the divide among everyday citizens, and not so much engaged on policy issues. And so with Braver Politics, Braver Angels has gone a little bit more that direction. And so we keep talking to each other about how to do it, but it's a little bit new, and we're sort of geared up from the get-go. Our founding was to engage Congress on particular federal policy issues. And it's been just a little bit hard to get those gears to mesh. So we continue to look for ways to do it, but it's, I think on both sides, we'd say that's been just a little tougher than we might have thought it would be.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. See, Tom Hughes, again, I'm going to invite you especially to focus on the issues of working with the bipartisan working group, thoughts, questions, concerns, and thank you for keeping your comments or questions concise.
Keith, you mentioned that most of the actual legislation that's gotten done has come from the bipartisan working groups. What's their actual track record? conceivably in this environment, they may have had the best track record and still not have had a very good one.
Yeah, they, it's a little bit of a complicated question, Tom, of sort of how you define the denominator, of how many issues they took on. I'm scratching my head trying to think of any issue they've taken on that they haven't succeeded on. Jack's been helping me look at that record as well. And I'm having a hard time. On the Electoral Count and Reform Act, they had a broader net. It was elections generally. And they looked at election worker security and federal funding for local election administration, some changes with the Postal Service to make mail-in ballots work. So they had 5 working groups, one on the Electoral Count Reform Act, one on the Presidential Transition Act, and then those other 3, election worker protection, funding for elections, and Postal Service reforms. They couldn't get to agreement on those 3. So they did get the Electoral Count Reform Act and the Presidential Transition Act passed. And so sometimes there have been occasions where they have failed to get everything that they originally did. They had to kind of whittle down. But I can't actually think of a single one that they took on in a very serious way. They had a little bit of initial work on some issues, and they're like, that's not going to happen. So if you counted those, they'd have a few. But anyone where they really sunk their teeth in, they got it done. It's a pretty impressive record.
Great. Thank you. Steve, I see your hand next. Can you come off of mute? Steve Howell.
Hi, yes, thank you. I was just in one of the breakout sessions. I came in late, got in just in time. And, as there seems to be a consensus that we need to take on something bigger, there were, several ideas thrown out in our breakout group, from immigration to tax reform, healthcare. So my question is, if we're going to go with the consensus that we need to tackle something, bigger, will it be as has been in the past, where we'll get a survey to all of the membership to give their thoughts on a variety of issues to decide which one we might want to tackle? Thank you.
Yeah, it'll be the same process that we've done before, that basis the interviews we have in the Congress, we come up with a top 10 issues list, where we ask them, what do you see as the most meaningful issues right for bipartisan action? And then the members weigh in on that top 10 issues. So that is the same as we've always done.
Great.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Dorsey.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hey, Cheryl. So my question is around timing, but before I ask it, I just want to share some information in terms of Braver Angels. I know that in 25, their focus is going to be common ground workshops on immigration. That was the topic that was chosen by the group as part of the Hold America Together campaign. And so I'm just sharing that because if we do end up choosing immigration, that might also hold a natural opportunity to work together more directly. It's just FYI. But my question is sort of a timing. Keith, when do you see a survey coming out? When do you see us deciding what's the next step? When will I hear from you again?
Yeah.
Every
step is always slower than I would like. It's a lot of work to get through these.
Just like Congress, right?
Just like Congress. We are going to have, I think this is going out tomorrow, actually, anyway, very soon, a kind of, we're not even sure what to call it, but a kind of pre-survey of the usual pick the issues survey that's kind of typically in kind of February, March timeframe. So we want to go ahead and hear on this issue, just because we had impressive participation tonight from the membership, but we want to email the entire membership. We're going to ask them the same kinds of questions that we were discussing tonight. So that's going to come out here very quickly in the next couple of days. And then it will be probably mid-February, late February, possibly into March, before you get the rate the issue survey, where you've got the top 10 and you get to rate those. So that'd be the next big one, is in the kind of late February, early March timeframe, likely. The challenge is this is one of the ways in which it's been a little hard to sync with Braver Angels is a little bit, is we work so hard to sync with Congress. Like we're really in daily conversation with members of Congress. And so we sync with theirs, and Braver Angels has worked a little bit like, here's how we're going to work within ourselves. And then it becomes very hard to then engage meaningfully with Congress. And so we can't get, I'd love to just give you, here's our timeline. But we have to be a little bit responsive to what's going on in the Congress. And so in 2023, you had the speaker's race, and they couldn't quite get organized. So we just couldn't meaningfully pick the issues because Congress couldn't give us meaningful answers about what could be worked on. So we had to kind of delay that quite a bit. So we don't get to just set the schedule ourselves, because we're really trying to work in a way that will inform Congress. And so we have to kind of take stock of where Congress is.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorsey. Alyssa, let's see you next.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm traveling, so I don't have camera available, but I love working with this group, and I appreciate so much all the effort that you all do. My question was about something you said in the introduction, Keith. You said something about success, that 3 for 3 issues is successful, and I definitely think so, and I think that's a wonderful track record. But I'm not sure that has to be the measure of success. So my question would be back to you. Is success being in the room? Is it being that we get whatever we put forth as a win? Just what is the measure of success? And is that something we can discuss as a group as well?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Alyssa. And I absolutely agree that having a perfect track record is not our objective. And honestly, I almost feel like I'd be happier if we didn't have a perfect track record, because it feels like, to me, I just start to suspect if we have a perfect track record, like, well, we aren't challenging ourselves enough in that. I've joked, if you ever come up with an idea where the primary metric of success is literally passing an act of Congress, get a different idea, right? Because that's just really hard. But at the end of the day, our primary objective, the way I'd say it, is, can we increase the likelihood in a meaningful way that Congress can pass sane bipartisan solutions because of our engagement with them? So we want to up it. We don't have to be 100%, but if we were 0%, I'd say we're not being successful. And somewhere in the middle there, where we are taking on stuff that's challenging and making a difference, but sometimes we fall a little short. That probably feels pretty good to me. But I do think it is about not just us patting ourselves on the back or we weighed in, but like, can we actually move the ball? As tough as things are in Congress, can we meaningfully increase the chances that Congress can act in a sane bipartisan way on a tough issue? And I think that 3 for 3 track record says we certainly can, and that's an ongoing, challenging thing. And I think all these questions we're debating tonight kind of bear on that, of how do we best do that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I love that answer. I think that aligns with what I was thinking as well.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Brian, you unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, I've got one question, Keith. I would like to know how many people are on each of these commissions in the Senate and in the House?
Yeah.
You saw, I saw two people listed. Are there others?
Yeah, good questions. I was listing the co-chairs of the groups. So it's a little different in the Senate and the House. In the Senate, they kind of call themselves the Common Sense Coalition, but it's a little bit of a loose coalition, and the exact working group on a given issue changes year to year and issue by issue. So there's a group of around 16 to 20 that have typically been in there, but on any given group, it tends to be just a little smaller. So some of them participate on this issue, but didn't on that issue, et cetera. So the groups change a little bit, but it's in that kind of 16 to 20 range. And then on the bipartisan working group in the House, that's kind of more formally organized. They meet every other Tuesday for breakfast, and they it's a set group, a more set group. It changes a little bit, but it doesn't change according to which issue they're working on. It just changes of who's in Congress and who's not. And that's 12 Republicans and 12 Democrats on that side. So they are, even though the House is much bigger than the Senate, they're only slightly bigger in terms of membership. Let me just say also on the Senate side, I'm honestly a little torn on how much to share with you about the kind of astounding levels of influence that we're having. But if you look at on the Senate group, who the primary leaders of that have been, the co-chairs have been Senators Collins and Manchin, that have racked up that incredible track record of kind of 5 or 6 legislative victories over the last several years. Of course, Senator Manchin is not returning to the Senate. He retired, will retire at the end of this year. And Senator Collins, this Congress has been vice chair of appropriations, and with Republican control of the Senate will now be chair of appropriations. And she told us that when she became vice chair of appropriations, that she simply couldn't dedicate the same level of time and leadership to these bipartisan working groups because she had to do it on appropriations. So to me, that was almost a bigger stakes than who's going to be president, who's going to control the House and the Senate, because there's where the policy making has been happening, and that Collins and Manchin have been the primary leaders of that. So folks, I got a little bit out of my lane, I'll just admit to you on this, because nobody seemed to be kind of paying attention to this. And just from our work with these groups, I just kind of self-nominated who I thought needed to kind of succeed Collins and Manchin. And so I went to Senator Lisa Murkowski and to Senator Michael Bennet and said, you guys have been really good on this and you seem to work together well. Someone needs to pick up the slack from Collins and Manchin. I think you guys ought to do it. You want to work with us in this way and with the House group? And they came back last week and said yes. So folks, that's kind of, I'm actually not saying that broadly. And so this is a big group to be saying that on, but that's just amazing to me that we have that kind of standing in relationships that I could say, hey, we need some leaders here. Why don't you do it? And they said, yeah, we think you're right. And they'll do it. So we're actually helping kind of compose the leadership and the group of who will do. We're having an input at that level as well, which is kind of stunning to me.
If I could ask one more thing here real quick, though. One of the one member of our breakout was concerned about the length of some of the surveys. Apparently one survey ran about an hour, and her concern was that a lot of people might have started it and got tired of it and left, showing or indicating, some of that low number. I am part of the Knowledge Networks system too, so I get surveys from them. I'm also a sociology major and learning how to do surveys right about now.
Yeah.
So as I've taken many surveys from a lot of different places, I've discovered that surveys tend to go in one of two directions. They're either very lengthy, as stated, and that creates problems with some people wanting to take them. And in other cases, they're not, it's too much black and white, yes or no. Well, that's normally not the answer.
Yeah.
The answer is somewhere in between. And so I would recommend to you, as your people develop your surveys, that you keep in mind its length, but also ensure that there is enough breadth in each question so that you get a more nuanced set of answers rather than just merely yes and no or black and white or strongly oppose or strongly agree. Those are fine to a point, but in some cases, and especially the more controversial, the more consequential, the gray matters more than the black and white.
Yeah.
And the nuance
Yeah.
is going to be
Thank you for-
extremely important in how you present that to your congressional workers.
Well, you sure put your finger on what we find most challenging in running this group is that trade-off, and we're always wrestling with exactly the trade-off you put your finger on. And there's never a perfect answer. Like, you can't come up with a 5-minute survey that's going to cut it at the level of detail that's going to be taken seriously in Congress. And so we're always trying to find that best balance and trying to innovate a little bit to maintain the kind of depth and breadth that our briefs do, but make it a little easier to consume and get through. So this last time, we had this new piece of am I blanking on the name? Something bites.
Brief bites.
Brief bites. Yeah, right. So I did little like 2 or 3 minute summaries, video summaries of each section. So you got a lot of text and here's the data and the graphs and everything. And so I just give a 2 or 3 minute summary of the section. And so you can hear that pretty quickly. And then you can kind of scan the text to see where you might want to dive in a little bit more. And so that's helpful. And we try to do very good data visualization and formatting. So we're always working on that, and kind of, I think we will never feel satisfied that we struck the best balance between those competing things. But that's what we're doing. I will say the broad consensus that it seems to be hearing of towards tougher issues, and the theme that seemed to be coming through is the most important part of that is consequential, and not so much controversial, but not to be afraid of complexity. And I think that's right, but that also just says, okay, if we want to take those on, you can't do that in a simple, short way. That's sort of the implication of doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Hey,
Thank you.
Keith. Thank you, Keith. I'm going to observe we're at 9:30 now. Maybe, I'm sorry, there's a bunch of hands up. Maybe we could take one more, and I encourage the rest of you to maybe type into the chat your question or your thought. That way we can capture it and maybe as part of the response back. Does that sound good to folks?
Oh, I so wanted to hear Quentin. We squeeze Quentin in.
All right, we'll do two. But then if you could be quick, both on your questions, please. Behe and Quentin.
Sure. Well, mine dovetails a little bit on your response to the previous question, about who you're working with. It seems to me that some of the prospects for bipartisanship depends on who comes back. So how many of the members of the bipartisan groups in the Senate and the House that we've been working with have been reelected and are going to still be there in 2025 to work with? And is there a reason why we are not working, say, with the Problem Solvers Caucus or other bipartisan groups in Congress?
Yeah, good question. So yes, there's a good robust set that got reelected and that are coming back. There's a little bit of change. So not so much those that ran and didn't get reelected, but you have Manchin, Romney, and Sinema who retired and aren't coming back. And there's one or two others that were in a couple of the groups. Everybody that ran got reelected on the Senate side. On the House side, I haven't looked at all those numbers yet, but there is a good robust set coming back. but it was part of my concern is there were enough not coming back by retirement. Wanted to make sure we had leadership, not so much a problem of having not enough members, but leadership for the group. And there were several elected in the Senate. I just don't know on the House side, but former representatives who were in those kinds of groups on the House side. So for Republicans, Senator-elect John Curtis, who was a representative in Utah, is a lot in the Romney mold of pretty interested in bipartisan work. And then Senator-elect Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan was in the House and really worked in a bipartisan way and will now be in the Senate. So that was a nice kind of pairing of a new Republican and a new Democrat that are coming back. So you lose some and then you gain some with each election. So yeah, I think there is a pretty good robust work. And then on the question of the Problem Solvers Caucus, with whom we have worked, they've invited us to come meet with them, and we have worked with them in the past. They're the better known and kind of more prominent bipartisan group in the House, I would say. They have been a little bit more difficult to approach. They kind of have their own way of kind of doing things, and it's been just a little harder. Bipartisan Working Group invited us to come in and meet with them and explore ways to work together. So it was a bit of a, just a little easier to mesh with them on that. They're also just a little bit, kind of a little lower key, lower prominence in a way that I think is probably useful. The problem solvers kind of can create their own controversies a bit. They aren't, although they're about being bipartisan, they can sometimes be so sort of dismissive of people that disagree with them. They have alienated some, and the bipartisan working group in the House hasn't alienated as many.
So they're partly the problem that needs to be solved.
A little bit. I'm awfully grateful that there is the Problem Solvers Caucus. If I were to say this in a more extreme way than I mean it, I would say sometimes at their worst, not always, but at their worst, it feels like they are the politics of outrage just from the center rather than the left or the right. And I'm like, well, I don't know that I like the politics of outrage that much better just because it's from the center. So it's a little bit of a we're right and you're all wrong. And if you're going to do this, it's got to be about including and growing the numbers working with you, not putting people off. And so they've got just a little different style than I think we have, than the Senate group does that we're working with. And the bipartisan working group that we are working with in the House is a little bit more simpatico with that kind of style culture that we have and that the Senate group has.
Thanks very much.
All right, thanks. We'll have one more, Quentin, and then thank you guys for putting your questions in the chat. I've seen Daniel and Chad and others.
Well, there's so many things I say, and I do want to keep it short, but Keith, I would love to talk to you more. I'm affiliated with all, but not any individually or singly. I've been a state chair of No Labels for Missouri when we were trying to get a third presidential campaign going. I'm also the co-chair for not blue or red in Braver Network, a part of Braver Angels, and have been involved with the Forward Party. And I knew about National Institute of Civil Discourse, but didn't know about CommonSense Americans. I knew about No Labels had their CommonSense agenda, and the problem solvers did. But I think my main point is just a general one about collaboration. This organization, this is my first exposure to individuals in it, has an amazing number of folks, an amazing effort and focus on legislative controversies or legislative issues to try to address them. Both Manchin and Susan Collins rather were part of they don't call it the Problem Solvers Caucus in the Senate, but worked on a lot of these issues you mentioned.
Yeah, Common Sense Coalition. That's the group we're working with.
Okay, so I just think it's kind of funny that there are a lot of people with a common mission or purpose or interest or goal. And I think that I would hope we could all, and this applies to No Labels, this applies to Braver Angels. I hope we could all kind of walk the talk, which means if we're telling the Congress to get along across party lines, let's figure out commonality. I feel like somebody like you, Keith, talking to Nancy Jacobson, talking the thing with David. I mean, they're tackling immigration. I wasn't in favor of it because I felt like you should focus on outcomes, not hot button issues and not policies. And I worked for 3 different congressmen, and even the immigration or the infrastructure bill, I don't think and problem solvers were very involved in that. I don't think I'd pat myself on the back very much about that. And Manchin himself doesn't, because it's not going to improve results because it doesn't have the whole permitting reform. And so he's been pretty outspoken. Individual members are like, we need these all, but I'm just basically saying, collaboration is the key. And I think you would be a great, impactful leader yourself. Just the membership you've been able to bring together and engage in this process. No matter what happens, that's something you deserve a pat on the back for. And I think this is an amazing organization.
Yeah, thank you, Quentin. I'll just say that those communications happen and have for years. So Nancy and I talk on occasion. David Blankenhorn and the other leaders at Braver Angels and I talk. We talk with the Problem Solvers Caucus, and so those communications all happen, and we are always looking for ways to collaborate. And so we do have a lot of conversations. We look for those ways. We've done, No Labels, and we have done some events together. We did have a difference of views on a few things here, and they went directions that we said we don't think that that's productive. But we are. I think your point, Quentin, that this is a challenging enough work, and at the core of it, it's about collaborating. We ought to be doing that ourselves with the groups. I think you could say that true of us and all of them, that we have that attitude and we're looking for those opportunities.
Yeah.
I'd be glad. I'd love to talk to you sometime. I've got some little secret processes, I think, maybe the behind the scenes work that could be done on this. I think I'd like to see more of it. And I speak as a member of all the groups involved, not singling anybody out for anything.
Yeah, we're going to need everybody working on it. The problem is tough enough. We're going to need everybody working on it.
I agree. Good point.
Well, I know I just want to take this moment now and sort of close this Q&A. Thank you all for being with us. We have we would like to do a little debrief with some of the facilitators yet. So we're going to, with respect to especially their volunteer time, we're going to thank everybody for being here. And Keith, any final?
Yeah, I'll just say blessings on all of you. I hope you know how much energy we draw from all of you. It's a lot of work what we do, but it's just so inspiring. I think that the country's saving grace will be the American people. I think we are less divided than Congress is. And I say that, and I believe it, and I point to lots of research on it, but I get it on a call like tonight with all of you, and then I feel it. It becomes real for me. And so just my gratitude to all of you. It is such an honor to work with all of you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm typing something here real quick, so don't cut